Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the GPN Technologies Mid-Year Webinar Series, Proven Strategies to Drive Your Practice Revenues to Record Heights. My name is Patty Warren. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Before we get started, I would like for everyone to know that you're in listen-only mode. You have been muted to reduce the background noise, but you will have access to the chat feature within Zoom. This feature will allow you to chat with the webinar host and the panelists to ask questions. The session is being recorded and will be available by the end of the week. It will be available in the Need Help section within Edge Pro, and you will also receive an email with a link to the recorded webinar. You will also notice that a survey link has been placed into the chat feature for you to complete when the webinar is over. Today is the third of our series of 5 webinars, and the title is Turn Your Online Presence into Revenue-Generating Machines. You will learn how you can maximize your online presence, transform your Google searches into new patients, and improve your optical sales like blue light and polarized lenses. We'll cover the key techniques to strategies for both online and in the lane that you can use to improve your results. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Evan Engel. And Evan is with iCare Pro. And Evan, I know you know more about yourself than I do, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself and welcome.
Oh, thanks, Patty. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's really an honor to be here. Once again, my name's Evan, and I work for iCare Pro. We're a marketing company that works only with optometrists for the past 14 years. And I grew up in Chicago, joined the Army after 9/11, and spent a bunch of years in the Army. And after that, I went to study marketing and went into business on my own. And afterwards, when I joined iCare Pro, I started working one-on-one with practices to develop their marketing and find new ways to help them reach more audiences and build their business. I think the turning point in my realization of just the impact that marketing can have for a practice is when my own son failed his school vision screening. And having worked with optometrists, I knew the concept of developmental vision, and I went to a developmental optometrist, and my son ended up needing a vision therapy. And it was just such a massive change in my life. And all of a sudden I realized just there's nobody who knows about this. And so it really empowered me to realize that when a practice, that ODs have so many tools to help people. And me as a marketer coming in and just looking at ways how we can drive growth for a practice and provide more value for the patients in terms of the actual care that ODs provide, it's become somewhat of a passion of mine, and something that I'm very excited about. I have 3 little boys, a 1.5-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old, and I live in Jerusalem, Israel. I've been here for 10 years, and that's kind of like the background of my life. And I guess we'll go right into the presentation. So for today's webinar, what we're trying to do is really kind of like focus in on your marketing, but looking at the main ways that you can drive growth online, new patient growth, increase revenue per patient, but in a way that is using the data as a background and then formulating your marketing strategy to really maximize the results that you can get. From everything from increasing revenue to improving capture to really focusing in on specific topics and specialty topics within the practice. And all of the discussions, whenever you're talking about marketing for a practice, I think one of the key things that always needs to be at the forefront is that practices have a very limited amount of resources, both financially, but even more importantly, time. And so the key when it comes to using data to guide your marketing strategy is to understand that you really need to maximize the effect of the limited time and resources that a practice has for the maximum value. And so really this yes right here is the key. What we're looking for is what are the things that a practice can do to grow their business, but at the same time that's going to do low effort and the maximum results. And so that's really the point of this webinar and the guiding principle here. And the way we're able to identify that is by using data across multiple parts of different data points to really help us understand what is going to drive the most value for the effort that you're putting in. Whenever you're talking about marketing, the key thing is to just understand the journey of where your patients are already interacting with you, because within those interactions are going to be the potential to do a better job at marketing, at getting across certain messages. And so iCare Pro works with 1,654 practices as of today, and and so we use the data of those practices to really understand the journey for most patients. And the journey really for almost all patients is going to start in a Google search. They're going to look for things like eye doctor in my city, or optometrist near me, or eye exam in my neighborhood. They're going to then see at the top of the page your Google reviews. Hopefully they're amazing. They're going to then click on that and go to your homepage, and the first image and the first the first thing they're going to see is going to be the brand identity of what your message is going to be. And from that, they're on the website side of things, they're going to usually go either to the doctor's bio or a specific topic. If they're interested in insurances that you take, or the frames you have, or a specific service. After that, they leave the online world and they start going into phone calls and your lobby and lanes, and then anything that you're doing after the fact. And so whenever we're talking about maximizing the value in a marketing initiative for the minimal effort, it's always helpful to understand where your patients are interacting already, because that's going to be the most impactful way to maximize your results without having to try to reach out to them somewhere else.
So Evan, while you're on the slide right there, I did have one thing that, we've all heard a picture's worth 1,000 words, and, that's what you're talking about for your home page. I mean, I never really thought about that they're going to Google search first, then looking at the review, and now it's all about the home page on my website. That's amazing. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, and then if you want to kind of just think about it from a different perspective, Tide laundry detergent could be in a black, plastic bag, but they put tons of thought and energy into the colors they use, the words that are on there, the imagery, because it's so impactful in the purchasing decision, in the message you're getting across. And so that first image at the top of the site, the colors you're using, the logo that you have, all of that is going to be the first impression outside of your Google reviews. That's really going to be important, because it can communicate something, or it cannot communicate something, or it could be worse than not communicating. So it's really important to look at that first image as, what is the message I want to get across? So I love this slide. I'm very excited about this slide, because one of the greatest parts of my job is that I get to actually help practices drive growth in their business, and it's measurable, and they see it in their business. They experience it. This is a practice that I worked with. This is a practice that is using Edge Pro, so we have the data of their revenue per new patient. And there are many, many ways to affect both the revenue and the new patient appointments to have this kind of growth on a monthly basis. This is 1 month's data for this practice. And so whenever we're talking about all these strategies and ideas and thoughts, it's important to understand that the goal here is to look something like this, is so that your practice can really grow, and both in terms of new patient revenue and in terms of patient revenue and new patient growth. So one thing, I love to ask ODs when I'm talking to them, what are your patients doing when they're sitting in your lobby? Now, I know the correct answer is they're not waiting around in your lobby, but but we all know that they're all on their phone. And the truth is that the average adult in America spends almost 4 hours a day, either on a phone or on their computer or on tablet, online. And one of the best ways to communicate with patients is just going to be online. And so a lot of practices are going to say, well, if every one of my patient is online, and even looking at this statistic, which is incredible, which is that your demographic is pretty much all on Facebook. And as a personal experience, my grandmother, who's in her late 70s, spends more time on Facebook than I do. you may think that just because somebody is somewhere, that that's going to be the best place to interact with them. However, that isn't really the case. What you're looking within your interactions is to interact with them within the context of what they're doing online. People aren't going to Facebook to learn about eye exams or glaucoma. um, they're they're really going there to interact with friends and family. They're going to learn about things that interest them. And so the primary way for a practice to market is not going to be to push your message somewhere where people are not looking for that message. Later on in your marketing, if you've advanced beyond doing the things that are most impactful, there's always room to grow out and then expand. But when it comes to really reaching out to patients, I love to use this practice as an example. This is a practice I was working with, and they're just incredible on social media. They do daily photos of cute kids wearing glasses. This is a giveaway that they do every month. Like and share this post to get entered to win something, and that's really resulted in a growing audience of people who like their page. You can see that many people are interacting with this content. And so you might think that this is really going to be a really great strategy for your practice. I mean, you have patients, you have cute kids in your practice. And the reason why I like to highlight this is because I don't think there are very few practices out there that will ever achieve the level of sophistication in their social media strategy as this practice. And yet, when you look at the numbers are really telling about the impact of their initiatives. Now, this practice does do a lot outside of their social media. So I'm not claiming that this is going to be your results, but the same statistics that apply here in terms of the percentage of where people are interacting and scheduling is going to apply pretty much across all practices. So this practice that has thousands of likes on Facebook and daily posts and videos, still their Facebook page accounts for a tiny amount of where their patients are actually going to come from to schedule an appointment. This is 1 month's data. Their Google traffic had 1,800 people in 1 month. From other search engines, 150. And that results in real appointments. They had 397 clicks to a scheduler, 125 tracked calls from their website. Their Google listing alone had 524 tracked cell phone calls in 1 month. And yet Yelp and Facebook combined only accounted for 15 people who came to the website. And if a practice who's so advanced in social media, this is what it looks like. So even more so for a practice who's really just starting their journey in marketing, this data is really helpful to guide you on where to focus your attention.
So Evan, we had a quick question come in while you're at that slide. I'm sorry, I know you had kind of clicked forwards there. So Google search, more people are using Google search than they are Yelp. The question was that, I always thought that Yelp was more popular, but it is the Google search according to the data that you've got here. And I'm going to be the first one to tell you my dad's on Facebook more than I am also. And I thought that several people marketing with Facebook was a great place to do it at.
Yeah, and I think that's a common thing, and that's really why data is helpful, because your thoughts shouldn't really guide your marketing strategy. The information on the ground of what's really happening should. And Yelp is Yelp, first of all, just comes much later on when people are looking, and so if we go here, Google versus Yelp. If you look up here, that's Google, that's Yelp. The first thing people are always going to see whenever they're looking for anything is going to be these three practices, what's called your Google listing, or this is called a local pack or whatever it is, Yelp, ZocDoc, all the other places that people might schedule from are going to come lower down on the page. And so for most people, they're not that interested in opening up 10 different websites. They're really looking at to make a quick decision. And if one practice in these top three have great reviews, that's usually going to be where people are going to go to. So that data about Yelp is true across all of our practices, and it doesn't matter if they're in California, where Yelp is definitely far more popular. It's just not going to be the primary place that patients are going to schedule eye exams or anything that's related to your practice. So if you only had, let's say, time and energy for one marketing initiative, the most impactful thing that any practice can do. And I would say even if you leave this webinar with just taking away one thing, it's that your Google listing and the reviews in your Google listing are going to be the primary way to drive new patient growth with the least amount of effort and the greatest value to your practice. Google looks at, so if you wanted to take Google and pretend that it was a person, Google doesn't know the practices. They've never visited your practice. They don't know if you're a good doctor. They don't know about any of the practices in your city. So one of the most impactful ways for them to know if your practice is a good one, which is ultimately their goal, to show people results that are going to be beneficial to them, is if hundreds of people who are local on a regular basis are leaving great reviews about your practice. And so 40% of their own equation, of Google's own equation of who to show up at the top of a page when people are looking for eye care, is just going to be based on your Google results alone. And then in addition to your Google listing and your Google reviews being so impactful to help you actually be seen, the way the world works now, the way that we all do shopping online and choose restaurants, and when we go to Amazon and we buy something, we look at Google, we look at reviews. Reviews are just very impactful. And if hundreds of people tell me that they enjoyed your practice, that it was a great experience, that's going to be as strong for most people as a personal recommendation. And so when it comes to just focusing on the number one thing a practice can do, it's going to definitely be Google reviews and your Google listing.
So Evan, while you're talking about Google there, what about paying for Google ads? Does that help out your reviews any?
Google ads don't impact your reviews. What Google ads do is they pay for you to be at the top. So if you look at this as an example, this practice is paying to be over here. So they're not showing up here naturally like normally, because they don't have as much trust and authority from Google. So they pay to be in place. And Google ads, we'll get to that in a second, I think, but in general, Google ads are a next step, not a primary step. They're also a more expensive step. So when we're looking at maximizing results for minimal resources, so resources can be the time and energy, but it can also be financial. And Google ads cost a significant amount of money when you're talking about getting a new patient to schedule by you. Usually that's going to be around $80 to $120 per new patient exam. Depending on the competition, where there are just far more impactful ways to grow your new patients that don't cost that much and will generate far better results. So this is an example of a practice that I was working with, and they were on a very high level package where we were developing a lot of pages and content and videos to try to capture all kinds of different searches and people looking in their city. And at the time, around a little bit more than a year ago, they had 22 reviews and a 3.7 star average. And I told the practice, I said, I can't keep on working on this if every time you're seen at the top, people just skip you because you're not a good practice. And so they really took that message and they went with it. It's a 1.5 doctor practice, and they were able to really just maximize the amount of reviews they get, and the impact is just astounding. So this is their statistics on their Google listing in the month of May. 8,300 people saw their Google listing. So this would be an impression on your Google listing when you see this, when someone's searching kids eye doctor near me. 8,300 people saw that. And the most amazing part of this statistic right here is that 80% of those people were not looking for the practice or for the doctor's name or the address. They were doing what's called a discovery search. Discovery search is something like typing in words like eye doctor in my city, or eye exam near me, or optometrist in my area, or diabetic eye exams. And so that's really an incredible statistic that 6,700 people are seeing them at the top of the page with amazing reviews. And all of those are really potential new patients. And so when we're talking about, once again, just the impact of working on your Google listing and Google reviews, this is what we're looking at. We're looking at 6,700 people in 1 month who are going to see you and are going to be impressed by when they do so. So, a lot of times practices don't really understand what actually makes up a Google listing. So I'm just going to take a few seconds to go over the Google listing, because I think we've established that your Google listing is super important. But where or what can you do to improve your Google listing? So a Google listing doesn't actually have that much to it. So that is good and bad, because it really means that there are a few things that you can do, which limits the amount of things that you need to do. You have photos in your Google listing. You have your practice name, a link to your website. You have your reviews, a description of what you are, address, phone number, hours. If anybody asks any questions, you can answer them. Google will pull some reviews from other sites on the web. And then you might have a little description and Google posts, which are basically like a Facebook post, but they only last for 1 week. That's basically the entirety of your Google listings. So when it comes to actually focusing on your Google listing, there really isn't all that much that you can and should do, and which is a good thing for practices, because it really says there's really one primary activity that is going to just help you in terms of using your Google listing effectively, and that is Google reviews, basically getting new Google reviews on a consistent basis, and then I would say also replying to those reviews. Other than that, there's very little that you can do to affect your Google listing, and that is really the primary activity when we're talking about Google listings.
So you can actually pay to have a better Google listing. It's all about your reviews, correct?
Correct, right. You can't really pay, and that's why Google trusts it, because if you could pay, then it would be much less trustworthy for them to kind of use that as a determining factor of who to show up at the top. Ultimately, all Google wants to do is provide good results for what people are looking for, and so, if you would be able to pay for that, then they wouldn't be providing you good results. They'll just be providing you results of people who paid for it. And so, yeah, reviews are really going to be the main way that you can work on your Google listing.
You will be happy to know, Evan, you told me if I could take away one thing from today's, I just did. I had no idea that just, so many people want to pay for Yelp, and we want to pay to have our Yelp accounts and things like this. And I never thought about the fact that the Google listings are free.
Right. Yep.
Wow. Thank you.
No problem. So going back to your question, Patty, about Google Ads, or PPC, which stands for pay-per-click advertising. So this is a great illustration of the same practice we were just talking about that went from 22 reviews and a 3.7 star average to 420 reviews and a 4.8 star average, as well as working on the content of their website to add in new ways to bring in new patients. If you look at their 13-month statistics on their website, in May of last year, they had 19 new patient appointments. And then in May of this year, they were at 87 new patient appointments. The blue represents non-paid traffic, so people who are coming in from primarily from Google search, but also, sprinkling here from Yelp and Facebook and Yahoo and Bing and other sources. And then the red represents paid ads and traffic. And so this is a very common situation, which is paid ads can be a way to help a practice grow, but it's never going to be the primary way. And it's also going to be a much more expensive way. So that's the breakdown here. And you can see the impact of just focusing on Google reviews and focusing on content, which we'll get into a little bit more. But it's really, really helpful to see that it can actually have a dramatic improvement. Once again, data is very helpful for you to kind of strategize on what to focus on, because that's going to show you what it can look like and how that can impact the practice. So now that we've established Google reviews are really kind of one of the most important things ever. So how do you get Google reviews? So the first thing is to understand that easy is not better when it comes to Google reviews. There are plenty of automated tools that might send an automatic email at the end of the day to all the patients that you scheduled with to ask for a review. But in our experience, as soon as a person steps out of the office, they're much less likely to leave a review. As soon as you automate it and nobody's personally asking, they're also much less likely. So our process is, first of all, it's a numbers game. You have to ask every patient. It's such a primary way to grow your business. You can't let that free money just go away. And second of all, it's really to ask them something like, it would mean the world to us if you just took a minute to leave a quick review on our Google page. And then while they're still in front of you and they're in the practice, they've had that experience, they liked it, that's when you send them an easy way to leave a review. We do text messaging, but there are other ways to do it. I think text messaging is probably the preferred method. But the idea is that you ask everybody, you make it a personal request, and you make sure you do it while they're still standing in front of you.
So I'm going to say that one more. I want this one more time, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So while the patient is still in the office, is when is the best time to ask for the Google review. And you're saying send them a link to their cell phone to fill out the review, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And one question that we had come in while we were here, as far as just tracking, from Google. What do you think about, like, in your own line, when your patients are filling out their patient information questionnaires, should you have a line item in there, how did you hear about our practice, so that they could check Google? Would that be a good way to track some things from Google?
Well, Google has its own data that's pretty helpful when it comes to this kind of thing, but I'm always a fan of getting more information rather than less. So, asking where your patients heard about you, or how they found out about you, what impacted their decision to come is always a good thing to have, I think. But yeah, I would recommend something like that. I think there's definitely no issues with that. And you might actually be surprised about what people are saying, and what really impacts them. And for example, if you do work on your Google reviews, what you will see is that more people are going to start saying your Google reviews, and that's going to solidify the value of it with you. So I think that's a great idea.
Okay. I know we're going to look in Edge Pro to kind of see how those, reviews are turning into more patients. So I know we can track it that way, but that was just an idea as far as being able to determine how to find out how they got to Google.
Sure. And Google also tracks cell phone calls on their listing, and impressions, and how many people saw you, and what they were looking for when they saw you. So you do have a lot of information about what's going on and the impact of what you're working on just from Google's own data, to basically verify if this is providing value and if this is worth the effort that you're putting in. As we move on from the number one thing, and once again, if we want, we could just go back to the number one thing and just talk about Google for the rest. But I think we did a good job of covering of why it's valuable and why it's really the number one thing that every practice should be focused on. We're going to look at other really high impact and low effort initiatives that are going to be helpful for growing your practice. And so we've really kind of broken it down into three main categories. Category one is, and they're all within the confines of using content or written words and video on your website, or online to drive measurable new patient appointments and revenue growth. And so we've broken it down into three main categories. The first one is to look at what areas, what topics, what locations are basically strategic opportunities for your practice. It could be a topic such as scratch dye, and identifying that none of the practices around you have a page about scratch dye. And therefore, if you work on that and you have a page, that's a way to generate new patients. Or it could be talking about a location that's nearby that has only one optometrist there, and therefore Google has place for three of them. So that's the underserved segments or topics and locations. Then we're looking at the power of video and really expanding one of the most impactful ways to drive any kind of growth, which is the doctor-patient relationship, and using video as a way to extend that outside of your lane. And then we're going to look at specializing on specific topics and really focusing in on them and using a topical approach to build out a bigger marketing strategy. This is a great example of a practice that I worked with. They were located in a smaller city, and they didn't really have competition in their city, so they were looking at how can they grow outside of their city for new patient growth. And together we developed 4 pages on eye emergencies, dyes, scratch dye, and pink eye, as well as a main eye emergency page. And the goal was to build better pages and more helpful pages and a better resource for anybody who has an eye emergency within the 5 cities around them. And for this particular practice, these 4 pages average 7 to 10 new patient appointments per month. Obviously, for every practice, it's going to depend on the population around them, but that's just a great example. That doesn't go away. You don't pay for it ever, but it continues to provide long-term growth and opportunity for you to expand your new patient appointments. And iEmergencies are just one of it's my secret sauce when it comes to helping a practice create new opportunities for growth. So you asked your patients this all day, so I had to stick this in somehow. So ODs on the webinar, which one's better, 1 or 2? 1 is a page about myopia control, and 2 is a page about myopia control. So let's go back again. Here you're met with a very nice graphic of the eye and a lot of text. And here you're met with a person who's a doctor, who is passionate and authentic and caring and knowledgeable and experienced. I don't really need answers because I think it's pretty obvious.
It's number 2.
It's number 2 if you didn't know.
That's the best marketing piece. I love that. I gotta tell you, that's cute.
Video is just so impactful in terms of interaction that it really, really is one of the most powerful ways to maximize your time and effort for results. And if you think about a video and the time that you need to spend, if the doctor spends 5 minutes talking about a topic, that video can now be leveraged for social media, for your Google listing, for your website. You can use it for before a mother comes into the lane with her kids to educate them on the importance or the dangers of medium and high myopia, or talking about the importance of blue light protection. So you can really leverage a few minutes of doctor video. And not only can you leverage it, but it's actually better that it's not professional. So you can really just, it's all about authenticity and passion and caring and showing that you really want to help them. And that is probably one of the most impactful things a practice can do to drive revenue growth for the practice. And trust me, I'm an optometrist. Your conviction and passion, and when you really believe that the tools you have as an OD can help people and change people's lives, whether it's blue light protection, whether it's multifocal contact lenses, whether it's dry eye, there are just so many ways that an optometrist can help people to have a better life, a more comfortable life, have better vision, prevent vision loss, that the conviction and passion that you have is what is going to really help you build your business. And that conviction and passion is what comes across in video and will never come across in a page of text. And if you think about it, once again, going back to Google as a person, if Google has to basically find things that people will want to see, so they also know that people don't want to read a page of text. They want to interact with a human being. And so having that video is going to have your page increase the likelihood of Google putting it on the front page by 53 times. Obviously, if I read a whole page about myopia control versus listening to a doctor, it's going to stick with me more. But the statistics is crazy. 95% of people retain the message with video compared to text. And so if what you're saying is important, if you want to educate a patient about the dangers of UV to the eye and how it's important to have UV protection, or you want to talk to a patient with presbyopia, that there are options outside of reading glasses, you want that message to stick. So video is going to be the way to do so. And then I think it follows as just a continuation of all of this, that the ultimate goal is to get that person who comes to your page to schedule an appointment, and that's called a conversion. And so pages with video will have an 80% higher conversion rate, meaning people will be far more likely to decide to schedule with you when you have a video that's authentic and caring and passionate and shows your expertise than if you don't. Now that we've kind of talked about the importance of Google reviews and how that is really the primary thing you can do, we talked about how you can leverage content and the locations around you to target new patient growth. And then we talked about the incredible importance and benefit of video. The other thing is to specialize. And there are all kinds of specialties. So obviously, when you talk about specialties, people are thinking dry eye or sclerals or vision therapy or low vision. But really, you can specialize in virtually any topic that you believe in and that you care about and that you're passionate about. And the idea is that you use the resources that you have and the interactions that you have to showcase that this is something that your practice is really great at, that you care about, that you want to help people with. One of the benefits of specializing or choosing topics or ideas or services is that it really does allow you to expand your market outside of your local market, because you're going to be talking about things that are more nuanced, that other practices around you a little bit further away are just not going to have that reach. You're going to a lot of specialties provide many, many opportunities for higher revenue. And in almost every case, it's not only about growing your business here, but pretty much specialties or focusing in on a topic allows you to really help patients more and have an impact on people's lives. So when it comes to marketing specialty care, I just wanted to share a couple of examples, but on the optical side, you could specialize in blue light protection or sunglasses. You can make yourself specialized as a pediatric practice or a diabetes practice, or you can specialize in contact lenses, dry eye, which, by the way, I've yet to meet somebody who doesn't have dry eyes, so that does represent an opportunity for practices. Let me know if you hear of anybody who doesn't have dry eye. Age-related macular degeneration. The specialty that you pick really just has to be congruent with what you believe in and what you care about and what you're passionate about, or what you think you can provide a higher level of care for your patients with. And it's less about one specialty being the best, and it's more about really focusing your attention on those specialties. And whatever specialty you decide to pick, it's really incredible, because let's say it'll take one random person from the webinar, and I say, "Are you a pediatric practice?" They're probably going to tell me no. And then, could you be without changing anything? And the answer is probably yes. It's less about buying the latest technology in a lot of cases. I mean, obviously in certain cases technology will help, but it's more about just showcasing and talking about it and writing about it and having videos about it and having discussions with your patients in the lane about it, and much less about actually changing anything in the practice. So practice nowadays, because people are online and interacting with you online, it's more about positioning yourself and the information you're providing, and it's much less about going back and doing a lot of CE on a specific topic. So that's really cool, because really a practice can go ahead and be a specialty practice without really changing much, but just really focusing their marketing efforts on specific topics. So for those of you who read some of the emails that we sent out recently, we were talking about different examples and case studies. And this example is just a fantastic example of a doctor who's passionate about blue light, and he wants to position his marketing or focus his marketing on this topic. So he chose this as his specialty topic. And what he's looking to do is look at all the interactions that patients are going to have with him and his practice, and how can he leverage those interactions to talk about blue light. And so everything from his website, his homepage, to a page about blue light, to the emails he sends out are going to talk about blue light, to the Facebook posts. When you call the practice and you put on hold, which obviously nobody's put on hold, but if on the odd chance somebody was put on hold, there's a recording talking about the importance of blue light protection. When people enter into his practice, the optician will greet them, and they'll ask for the patient to see their glasses, and they'll do they'll shine the blue light laser to see if the patient has blue light protection. In the lane, the doctor will say, you might have noticed that the optician took your glasses. What she was doing was checking to see if you had blue light protection. He then does a little demonstration with the laser where he has one pair of glasses with blue light protection, and then he takes the patient's glasses, and then he explains to them how the dangers of blue light and the benefits of blue light protection. When he hands off from the exam over to the optical, he then marks that he's recommending blue light, and he firmly believes that everybody, even if they don't wear glasses, should have blue light protection, and he's talking to his patients about that, and he's recommending that. So this is a great example of somebody who said, I want to specialize in something. I want to make sure that I can help people and I'm passionate about this idea, and I'm going to look at all the interactions that I have and make that a marketing initiative. Because he believes in it and he cares about it and he's passionate about the care that he gives to his patients. And the incredible thing here is that he invested a grand total of $18.81 on the blue light laser, and the results in the practice was a 40% increase in second pair sales. And he really took the same exact approach when it came to UV and showcasing to the patient the damage that was done to their eye, and then talking about the importance of UV protection. But this is just a great example of a practice that's focused on a topic, looked at the interactions he has, and how can he make sure that he's getting the messaging across in those interactions, and then the impact that had in the practice. Not to mention that when you do these kinds of things, there are many side benefits. Your patients will have a better experience because they think they experience a doctor who really cares about them. You're going to differentiate your optical from, let's say, a budget optical or online. So there are all kinds of side benefits as well. The key, and if we get across a second message, so the first message was Google reviews, and I hope that came across well. The second message, if you're going to get from all of this, is that don't base your marketing efforts on your feelings and what you think or how much time your grandma spends on Facebook. But luckily, we live in a data-driven world where we have so many ways to measure and see what's impactful and see how our efforts are impacting the bottom line of our practice and the growth of our practice. And data is what is going to empower you in your marketing efforts to choose the right ways to market and then measure the success of that marketing. And so there's external data sources like Google My Business, which is going to tell you how many people interacted with your Google listing, which will be a great way to showcase the value of Google reviews and all the effort you put into your Google listing. You have Google Analytics, which is going to basically show you where patients are coming to your website from, how long they spend, what pages they go to. Call tracking, which will allow you to really measure the impact of the different initiatives that you're doing in marketing to see what's actually driving appointments. Looking at the reviews that people are leaving and getting information and feedback from that, looking at search results and trying to determine what the impact of the work that you've been doing on content and video is having. And then, of course, there are internal data sources like Edge Pro and looking at the data from inside your practice, your practice management system, and patient feedback. And so data is really available, which is awesome. And then data is a really powerful tool for you to focus your efforts on things that are really going to have a measurable impact, and then measuring that impact and seeing if it really warrants the effort and resources that you put into it.
Yeah, this is what I like to call trust but verify. We trust that our marketing initiatives are working, but we really need to verify that they are. If we're going to put time and money into them, we need to make sure that we've got that return on our investment. And one of the ways that we can do that is when we think about our capture rate. And capture rate, we've got on our slide here just where we're talking about what the different ways you can affect your capture rate. One thing that you could do is increase your recall frequency. Instead of doing it, 1.5 years, do it to 1.3 years. Just by patients coming in the door more often could have an impact on your business by $120,000. If you put that into a 10-year type perspective, that would be, 1.2 million. If you could also just increase your patient capture rate, which is the patients that are spending money in your practice based off of an eye exam, if you could increase that by like 5%, again, you could see where that could increase your revenue by $24,000. We're going to look in Edge and kind of show you guys a couple of ways that you can verify these type initiatives and that sort of thing. We have another way is your patient capture rate. The value of a new patient. If you think about you have 20 new patients a month, that could impact your business by $72,000. I know Evan was talking about some specialty patients that if you could, focus on one type of a specialty type item and what that could bring into your practice per month.
So I chose
the other type. Yeah.
Yeah, I chose the number 8 because I've had 2 practices recently who told me that they are getting approximately 8 new patients fittings for scleral lenses a month since starting to focus on that, and working on pages like a Great Keratoconus page or a Fuchs dystrophy page or stuff like that. And so I didn't choose that just randomly. But that's actually something that is relatively doable to drive specialty patient appointments that have a really a high impact on the revenue per patient that you're generating.
And
Okay.
the next one is your existing patient. We can also kind of think about ways that we can determine the return on our investment, or as trust but verify, as I was calling it, where you could think about increasing individual items like contact lens sales, blue light, optical capture rate, second pair sales. I know we've got several things listed up here, and I don't think that we have to read through each and every one of them, but what I would like to do is show you within Edge Pro where some of these items can be found. And I'm going to pull up my Edge Pro here. First of all, when you're coming into Edge Pro, you can come into your business overview and come into your overview summary. This is giving you an overview of your overall business. And everything, your Google searches, your new patients, everything is going to affect your overall business. I know we kind of talked a little bit about some different items, but one item that is very crucial on this page, not only is increasing our revenue, but we want to increase the amount that the patients are spending out of pocket. So when Evan was talking about some of these specialty type fits, that's going to increase this type number. We're going to go a little deeper to look at a few different items that you can track. But overall, anytime you're doing a marketing initiative, it's usually going to start right here in our business overview page. When we were talking about new patients versus established patients, we can come right in here and come into our sales summary. And when we're in our sales summary, our exam stats are right here on the top right. You can see how many new patients you had come in versus existing patients. This is a great way to track our actual new patients to see if by increasing our Google searches and Google reviews have made a difference in our new patients. When we're talking about a little bit on the capture rate on one of those slides, capture rate is basically when a patient makes a purchase in your business per exam. Great way that we can check that is to come right into our advanced reporting button and come into our sales summary. When you're in your sales summary, we have several different capture rates in here. Anywhere you see /exam, so this says frame/exam, lens/exam, eyewear/exam. This is patients that purchase a frame only per exam. You can see that you're at 85%. Lenses only per exam, 99%. Where it says eyewear/exam, this is our complete capture rate, where they purchased a frame and a lens. So you have several different types of capture rate that you can track right here on your Edgemarks Matrix page to be able to make sure that some of those initiatives are where they need to be. Now, lastly, where I was going to show is actually our CPT breakout. When you come into the advanced reporting, the CPT breakout is going to be right over here. And in that CPT breakout, this is where you could track some of those specialty type items. I pulled one up here as an example of an office that did Ortho-K. They focused on Ortho-K. They did it for Q1 of 2019. You can see that they did 8 Ortho-Ks, and they brought in $6,000 in revenue. All I did was simply come into my CPT breakout, and right here in the search feature, you can type in the name or you can type in your CPT code so that way you can track those individual type items. So as you're working on some of the specialty type things and building out your marketing with specialty items, you can track some of those things over here in your CPT breakout. So we've gone through everything here, and we are going to leave the floor open here for just a few moments to be able to kind of have some question and answer sessions here. First of all, Evan, I want to thank you. This was absolutely some fantastic information. If any of you have some questions that you would like to ask Evan directly, you can. We've got his email address right here on the screen. Also have his I believe this is your cell phone number, isn't it, Evan, or is this your work number?
This is my work number.
Work number, okay. We didn't give out your cell phone number, did we?
Yeah.
So, this is actually his work number. This is actually the landing site for iCare Pro. If you have any questions about iCare Pro, you can contact him about that also. On the right-hand side here, we've got our links for a training session for your Edge Pro. If you want to know how to track some of these items or you want some more information on tracking items within Edge Pro, we can do that for you. Just simply click on the link. The next one here is where you could schedule a demo. If any of you do not have Edge Pro and you're interested in learning more about Edge Pro, you can schedule a demo so that we can show you some of the different items that it can do. Do want to remind everyone that the webinar was being recorded. It will be available in the Need Help section within Edge Pro. You will also be sent an email with the link so that if you wanted to watch it again, you can. And we have the survey that was placed into the chat feature. If you would, fill out the survey, let us know what you thought about the session. And at this time, we can kind of open it up. If anybody has any questions, you can ask within that chat area, and we can be answering some of those questions. I did have a couple come in while we're kind of asking for a few people here. So I had someone, the main thing to think about is Google search. Would that be where you would start? Not Google search, I'm sorry, Google reviews. Is that correct, Evan? That would be your main focus
that would
first.
Be, 100%. If you're going to do one thing and one thing only, and you walk out of this webinar and you have a renewed focus on Google search, well, you're going to definitely have measurable growth for your practice by just focusing in on that one thing. Absolutely.
And it's all, I have another question here that it's very hard. Sometimes I feel like we have too many initiatives going on at one time. Is it better to have less initiatives and concentrate on it for a longer amount of time?
That's generally speaking, yes. My experience with working with practices one-on-one is that practices have tons of ideas and they get them from all over the place, and they come and they're excited about it, and it ends up being that they don't put enough effort into any one initiative. And the key is to focus in on initiatives that you can do well, and that those initiatives are going to drive the most impact at your practice. And so I would say, you don't focus on everything, focus on things that are going to have the greatest impact, do them at the best level that you can, and then if you see that you have more time or more resources, to then move on to the next thing. And so just as an example, I used to always tell my practices, I would say, I would rather you stop working with iCare Pro and just do Google reviews, right? If you're not doing the things that are going to have the most impact, so focus on them first. And then later on, when you've got a handle on that, you can always find new things to do. But in terms of the length of time, I don't know if the length of time is more important, or it's about just maximizing the effectiveness of that initiative. So like with the blue light example, and how he really honed in on blue light and said, where are my patients interacting? How can I impact them in the interactions effectively? He did a great job. I don't know if he spent a longer amount of time doing that as much as he just looked at it and said, I want to do the best job of doing it.
And yes, I can see where that, I can tell you I've done that before myself. You've thought about it, and we've concentrated on AR and second pair sales and transitions and blue light, and we're just concentrating on too many things all at one time. So I just want to remind everyone that I do have Evan's email address here on the screen. If you have any questions that we may not have answered, you can reach out to him directly or call. We've also got our links here for our Edge Pro training. If you would like to have any training from Edge Pro, we can do that here. And also, if you do not have Edge Pro and you would like to schedule a demo, we have it here on the right side. I have one question coming in. It says, what is the name of the tool they can get their Google information to update? That makes sense?
So you have Google My Business, which is your Google listing. you could go to business.google.com, and then you put in your practice name and address, and you probably, it's owned by an email address, and so it might kind of ask you some questions if you don't own your Google listing. So shoot me an email. I'll send you some instructions on how to claim a business listing or how to get rid of duplicate listings. That's something you could do. And then within your Google My Business listing, you'll have access to all the stats and all the information that we looked at today, and stuff like adding Google posts or answering questions and answers or responding to reviews or looking at who saw you and how many people left reviews, those kinds of things. Then there's a whole nother side of Google statistics and stuff like that, which is Google Analytics, which is focused on the website itself and just where people are finding you, what they're doing when they're on the site, how long. So as a good example of that, one way to just highlight the impact of Google traffic versus, let's say, Yelp is that the average the average visitor that would come from Google would probably spend around 2 minutes on a site, depending on how much you have going on, how many videos you have on the site, what kind of topics you're talking about. Whereas somebody coming in from Yelp or Facebook on average spend around a quarter of the time. And so that kind of information is accessible through Google Analytics. A little more complicated, but if you shoot me an email, I'll try to point you in the right direction. I hope that helped.
I believe it did. I think I have one more question here. I think this will be our last one. It says, you have a practice with multiple doctors. Should you have a Google business page for each doctor or just the practice? That is an excellent question.
That is an excellent question. So Google actually automatically generates doctor listings, and that shouldn't be where you put your energy and effort. But they're good to have if somebody's looking for the doctor's name. That will likely show up. But in general, you want to focus all of your efforts on the practice listing. And so if you have you have multiple doctors, each one will have their own listing with their name. You shouldn't use the practice name on that listing. You should just use it on one listing. You should have one main one for the practice. That's where you put the Google reviews. That's where you focus on the images. That's where you focus on, adding stuff to it and responding to reviews. And then the Google listings for your doctor, I wouldn't say you have to actively work on that, but they should be automatically generated. And if you don't, you could create it. I don't know if it's really worth the time to focus on that. The only time when a doctor's listing becomes more important is if you have like a certain area of specialization. So if, let's say, you want to focus in on vision therapy, so it's kind of helpful to have a doctor's listing, and then at the end you might say vision therapy, neurooptometry, and sports vision, and that will help that doctor's Google listing kind of pick up some of those searches. But in general, focus in on one listing for the business.
Evan, I'm going to tell you, this was fantastic. Great job. I have learned so much today. I hope everyone else has enjoyed it also. Thank you all for attending. Remember that we do have another webinar next week, so I hope to see you all again next week. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome.